talked a little bit about regulation this morning, and I promised you a bit more regulation this afternoon. So please welcome William Mason, who is Guernsey's regulator.
Thank you. And might I perhaps start by saying that it's been really pleasant this afternoon to meet a large number of you who are in Guernsey doing good quality business. I can remember I used to police the streets of London in my youth. You spent far more time dealing with criminals than talking with ordinary members of the public. Similarly, as a regulator, you can often find yourself spending far more time dealing with the difficult cases, shall we say, than with dealing with the many thousands of good people employed in Guernsey doing good quality business. And it's been really pleasant to hear about a number of the good quality things and funds which people are doing this afternoon. Now, I'm here to talk a little bit about how our funds regulatory framework can perhaps add value for both your investors and for you as promoters managers. We try to have a framework which is both unbureaucratic and which provides genuine reassurance for investors that those running the funds will do so honestly, with integrity and with appropriate diligence. I hope that we're known for sensible regulatory standards for funds and a proportionate risk-based approach in all areas of financial services. Today I'm going to focus on the two elements of our fund regulation that really differentiate us from many other jurisdictions. Firstly, our fast-track application process, and secondly, our sustainable funds regime. We'll skip that slide to get to the main event. We all know that you as fund managers and enablers don't want to be embroiled with a never-ending regulatory bureaucracy when you want to establish a fund. So to make sure we don't present an unreasonable barrier, we have over time devised and refined a well-lubricated fast-track application system. There are 4 fast-track application types in respect of the Guernsey regulated entities, 3 for funds and 1 for managers. Now, which you want to use will depend on what you want to do and who you want to raise funds from. On the fund side, we've got the private investment funds regime, the qualifying investor funds, and the registered collective investment schemes. There's also the fast-track licence application for entities acting in respect of QIS or registered funds, i.e., speaking more colloquially, that's the managers rather than the funds themselves. So for those of you who aren't familiar with our rules, don't worry, I'm not going to recite them at length. That would be incredibly dull and keep you from drinks for some hours. Well, just to give you a very high-level sketch, we've got the private investment funds. A private investment fund, or PIF, as the name says, is an investment structure, either open or closed-ended, that's based on a close relationship between investors and the managers. For those of you who haven't picked one up yet, I thoroughly commend this booklet, which Guernsey Finance has written explaining the different types. There are 3 different routes which can be taken to get to a PIF. The first one is the licensed manager PIF. The philosophy of this is the fund framework is based on a close relationship between investors and the managers. And to ensure this, a Route 1 PIF, as we call it, shouldn't contain more than 50 legal or natural persons. Now, we've also got a Route 2 PIF, which has slightly lower regulatory burdens, which is designed for qualifying private investors. It's accessible to those qualifying private investors, which means that those investors have to be able to evaluate the risks and the strategy of investing and bear the consequences of the investment themselves. And then, I think particularly interestingly, we've also now got the Route 3 PIF, which is a family relationship PIF. As you can gather from the name, this is about investors who want to invest together, who share a family relationship or are eligible employees of the family. We designed this to allow family offices to access a regulated fund structure, something which can help them helpfully bring together investments for several family members in one place, and also minimise the due diligence burdens otherwise put on individual family members each time a family office wishes to make a significant investment. And if an applicant is pre-approved by us as a trusted counterparty, our Authorisations and Innovations Division can turn the applications for a PIF around in as little as 1 business day. So that's the PIF side. Turning to the qualifying investor funds, a QIF can be an authorised open-ended or closed-ended fund. In the QIF context, a qualified investor is defined as a professional investor or an experienced investor and or a knowledgeable employee. These are basically funds aimed at institutional investors who will fit easily within this criteria, resulting in the ability for a fast-track submission, significantly reducing the time taken to get to the launch of a fund. And then for registered funds and QIFs, the turnaround time is about 3 business days, which isn't dreadfully long. And if there needs to be an associated licensee, i.e. fund manager, licensed alongside the fund itself, they can have a 10-day fast-track time frame, which I think most of you who have maybe had to set up funds and get fund managers authorised before is a reasonably quick amount of time. So that's a sort of gentle overview of the fund regime, the bits which have been proving most popular over the last couple of years and which we think may be of interest to some of you. To turn a bit to the sustainability funds regime, I suppose part of our function as a regulator is to look over the horizon and evaluate emerging risk areas. And we've got the twin crises of climate change and the degradation of nature, our key risk areas. And here we think Guernsey can help the world with the rapid adaptation which is necessary, given the scientific evidence of unsustainable use of our natural world by an ever-expanding human population. Our green approach was developed to show our commitment to enable climate finance through providing a supportive regulatory climate. We're seeking to provide a framework for the raising of funds to support the global transition towards a low-carbon economy. We're focused on sustainable finance in Guernsey because we think it's an area where our ability to create statutory regimes to support high-quality fund managers wanting to undertake low bureaucracy but highly reputable sustainable investment is quite decent. To put it another way, we don't actually think that everyone in this room really wants to have to follow a several hundred-page taxonomy, documenting every aspect of everything, rather than actually focusing on sourcing, making, and evaluating high-quality climate change or nature-positive investments. First of all, we established the Guernsey Green Fund framework in 2018, back when investments in the environment were still a bit like a Wild West, and when scandals about greenwashing were shaking the confidence of investors, as well as the public. This is a framework based on well-regarded official sector international climate standards, and it awards a label to funds dedicated to combating climate change for those who are able and willing to prove it. We think at the time we did it, it was probably the first label given by a statutory regulator for a climate change fund, and I'm delighted to say that Guernsey Green Funds now have well over 5 billion of assets under management. We've also sort of done a thematic report showing how our authorised green funds are delivering their environmental objectives, rather than greenwashing, following an in-depth piece of supervisory work. We're always thinking about what's sensible innovation, and we decided to build on our experience from the Guernsey Green Fund to tackle the nature crisis. Here we saw a gap in the market, and we were encouraged by the Dasgupta review and the World Economic Forum confirming that 50% of global GDP is moderately or highly dependent on nature and ecosystem services. Thus, we developed the Natural Capital Fund framework in 2022. This new Natural Capital Fund framework has been created as parallel and complementary regulatory designation for funds with an investment objective, which is to make a positive contribution and or significantly reduce the harm to the natural world as they invest. I suppose our intention here is to provide environmentally conscious investors with assurance that their capital is deployed in efforts to promote the protection and recovery of the Earth's natural environment. The fund's objectives must be aligned with the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity's Kunming-Montreal Global Diversity Framework, or the UN Sustainable Development Goals 12 to 15, or certain EU taxonomy environmental objectives. Now, please note here, I'm saying not and, but or. We, for ourselves, are quite happy to authorise a fund which merely focuses on one aspect of transition finance, which will help achieve just one of the Global Biodiversity Framework's 2030 action goals. What we're seeking to do here is to offer a low bureaucracy, high environmental outcomes regime. Transitional investments are welcome. Earlier we heard panellists before the break talk a little bit about this and the need not to run away and just invest in the squeakily already clean. We designed the fund framework to allow dedicated fund managers to not just buy Spartan mountains and deserts which look vaguely environmentally clean, but to invest in and engage with companies which are currently damaging nature, but which are prepared to engage with an active and patient investor base and make investments in harm-reducing technologies to meaningfully reduce the harm they do to nature, for example, through reduced river pollution. We firmly believe that disinvestment is the suboptimal option, and that environmentally committed fund managers need to wrestle with the difficult transition issues and to work to clean up that which is dirty rather than merely sailing away from choppy waters. After all, if we think about the climate change transition, it requires a vast use of scarce raw materials, which need to be mined in a much more nature-friendly fashion. I think we've all seen some fairly horrific stories about some of the environmental exploitation to get some scarce rare earth metals out. So we welcome fund managers who are prepared to engage honestly and wholeheartedly in reducing harm by investing in transitioning entities. By doing so, we trust and hope that Guernsey can make a meaningful contribution to creating a much cleaner and more biodiverse world for our children and, hopefully if we get it right, our grandchildren. So that's it from me. Thank you very much.